All right, we're going to explore a number of different thinking tools in this course so that you can figure out which ones work best for you and put them in your toolbox so that you can pull them out when you need to as you confront and solve problems as you go merrily through your life. And I'm going to introduce one of those tools to you now, although it's really not much of an introduction because this thinking tool is one I imagine you've used many, many, many times over your life. All right, so think of this. You go to do your laundry. You pick up the laundry basket, you walk over to the washing machine, you dump the entire contents of the laundry basket into the washing machine, you put your soap in and hit start. It runs for a certain amount of time, dings. You go and you move all of the clothes from the washing machine and put them in the dryer, rev that thing up, and after a while it squawks at you to tell you it's done, and now you go down and start folding the clothes. And as you're folding the clothes, you realize that you're missing a sock. You have a pair of socks that you put in the washing machine, and now as you're pulling them out of the dryer, you notice that one is missing. And you think, well, what in the world happened to the sock? It's not in your laundry basket because that's empty. You can see that. It's not in the washing machine because you look inside the tumbler thing there and it's got any clothes in it. So what happened to that sock? And you're sort of ranting and raving, where is my sock? Where is my sock? And your partner comes into the room and says, what's your problem? You say, I'm missing a sock. And he says, well, I know what happens. Or she says, I know what happens. The sock grabber got it. And you look quizzically at this person and say, what on earth is a sock grabber? And this person with a very straight face says, look, everybody knows what a sock grabber is. They're these invisible aliens who sustain their own invisible existence by eating socks that have been placed into dryers. That's what happened to your sock. That's why it's missing. So my question to you is this an explanation for why you are missing a sock? And what is the answer to that, by the way? Yes, it is an explanation. It explains why there is a sock that you believe you put into the dryer that is now not in the dryer. Now, is it a good explanation? Well, that depends on what the other possible explanations for the missing sock are. Because if there's an explanation that also explains why the sock is missing, but it's better than the sock grabber explanation, then we probably want to grab onto that explanation, although that requires that we define what a better explanation is. So can you think of a better explanation for the missing sock besides, or an explanation for the missing sock that's better than the sock grabber explanation? And you're probably thinking, well, yeah, obviously a perfectly plausible scenario is that I thought I put both socks in the washing machine, but I actually didn't. And even though it's not in my laundry basket, maybe I dropped it on the stairs as I was carrying the laundry basket down. So maybe that's it. Or maybe I have a child who likes to make sock puppets by cutting holes in my socks, but knows that I get angry when this child does this, so they kind of sneak the socks out of the dryer, hoping that I'll just believe I lost it somewhere along the way. So that might be why I'm missing a sock. Maybe it's stolen. Maybe the sock dropped in that small space between the washer and the dryer when I was moving the clothes from one machine to the other. Maybe it fell on the floor and I accidentally kicked it under the dryer. So these are all explanations that explain why the sock is missing. Even the sock grabber explanation is an explanation for why the sock grabber is missing. But I'm imagining that you're thinking that some of those explanations are better than others. So you probably think, well, the child stealing the sock out of the dryer is a better explanation than the sock grabber, provided there's kids in my house. If there's not kids in my house, then that starts to get funky if I think my partner is the one that's making sock puppets by stealing my socks. But if there are kids in the house and the kids are rascals and they've done this before, in other words, I've seen this phenomena play out before, maybe that's a perfectly reasonable explanation. If you know that you have dropped things before and have not known that you've dropped them, then maybe the dropped sock becomes a better explanation. And eventually you're gonna come down on an explanation that you might not know is fully correct, but it's going to be better than the other explanations. And that's going to be the explanation that you go with. And there's this sort of general rule that we want to use, and we'll steal it from William of Ockham, who came up with this 1,000 years ago, and he said something along the lines, this is more verbose than what he said. If you're offered two different explanations for why something occurs, and both explanations are equally adequate, and by equally adequate, I mean that both explanations completely explain why the phenomenon occurred, then you should choose the explanation that is the simplest and easiest to prove. All right. So the important thing here is that if the two explanations both explain the phenomenon in its entirety without leaving parts of it out, then what you should do is choose the one that seems simplest, right? Like keep it simple, stupid. Idea. And so in this case, for us to believe the sock grabber explanation requires that we also believe that these invisible kinds of creatures exist and that somehow an invisible creature could eat a physical object and the physical object also then becomes invisible. And all of a sudden we're starting to get sort of logical knots on top of logical knots here, and we think like, you know what, that's not the best explanation. So I can't prove that I dropped the sock. I never found the sock. You know, who knows what happens to it. But I think all of these other explanations are better than the sock grabber explanation. So even though I'll never really know what happened to my missing sock, I'm just going to push the sock grabber explanation out the window here and go with one of the other explanations. And we're going to call this IBE, the inference to the best explanation. And all that means is this, is that given everything we know, this theory that attempts to explain this event seems like the best one. It may not be the right one, but it's the best one that we have right now. And this is really a thinking tool that's commonly used in science. So you think about the difference between Newtonian physics and Einstein's, particularly as it relates to gravity. Is one correct and the other incorrect? And saying, yeah, that's kind of a funny way to think about it. It just seems like Einstein's theory seems to predict more when it comes to gravity. So it's a better theory, at least now. And people are trying to come up with better theories than Einstein's. And is Newtonian's theory of gravity wrong? Newton's theory of gravity wrong? It's like, well, wrong. It got us to the moon. You know, it's done some really impressive things, his physics. So it's sort of incorrect to say that it's not a good explanation of how gravity works. We've just got a better one now, one that's a little bit more useful. Now, we can apply this theory to the question, we can apply this thinking tool to this question that we're asking ourselves about what exists and are we bodies or do we have bodies?